Hi, Ahava. This is the first of our geometry highlighting videos. The whole point of the geometry highlighting video is so you don't have to do quite so much note taking, and I don't have to do quite so much note writing. So hopefully it'll let our classwork videos be shorter because we go through these videos. Also, it'll make it easier on you because you're allowed to highlight in your book. So you don't have to worry about whether or not Isaac has another copy because he'll have his own book and he'll be highlighting in his book. And that way it'll be less for you to write because hopefully you won't have to write things you already know. You'll just have to write things that you know you need to remember. So in the basics of our highlighting, I know you already have rules for some highlighting colors. I've tried to stick with those rules as much as I could and come up with different colors if we needed something different. So there's a yellow highlighter, and these are not the highlighters I plan on using all the time, but these are the highlighters I have to use today. There's a purple highlighter, and there is a blue highlighter. And the yellow highlighter is going to be used for all of the definitions and things you need to have memorized eventually. Doesn't mean that they have to be memorized today. Doesn't mean they have to be memorized tomorrow. But sometime probably before you take the midterm, they need to be stuff you already know. But writing them down helps a lot. The purple highlighter is for theorems and postulates. And those you'll write down, but not what you highlight. You'll write down paraphrased versions of what you highlight. We'll do some of that so that you'll be able to tell the difference. And then the blue would be for any other info that I think might be important, but that you don't have to have memorized. Some formulas that you're going to want to keep up with, but don't have to be memorized. That's the kind of thing I would do in blue. So these are the three basic ones that we're going to be using, and those are the three basic ones that you need to worry about for the probably whole first chapter. If I need to pull in other colors, I will, but I think these are the three that did not already have rules for them. So anyway, these are the three that I have. I know that you have highlighters and you have a notebook and you have a book. So I need for you to take a few seconds, go ahead and gather up your highlighters. Make sure you get a yellow one for today. I don't think you'll need the other two today. And then go ahead and make sure you grab your notebook. I need the notebook that we plan on setting up because that's what we're going to start today. In your notebook, you're going to need to have different sections. So the first section is dedicated to definitions. That's what we're going to start writing on today. Then the next section will be dedicated to theorems. That's what we're going to start writing on tomorrow. And then the next section will be your notes from class, the class work that you do. And then the next section will be homework. And then your fifth section will be your quizzes and tests that you want to keep up with. Now, just like it was last year, whenever you get full, say 3 or 4 months in, or even just 3 or 4 chapters in, and your notebook is full and you're ready to transfer stuff, transfer by chapter. So all of chapter 1, 2 can be moved, and then you're working on chapters 3. Or all of chapter 1 can be moved, but you're still working on chapter 2. So don't move anything in chapter 2 yet. Try to keep the chapters together so that when you go back to study, it'll be easy to find your stuff. That's why you move them whole chapters at a time. And you already have a notebook to move them into because I bought you one of those too. The folder that I bought you, the expanding file folder, is to be used for all of your tests and quizzes and reviews and any other papers that you get. And you'll be getting quite a few papers. So that's what that's for, and it should be able to hold all of them. If it doesn't, let me know. I'll tell your mom what to do. So today we're going to go over the highlighting out of section 1.1, and then we're going to go over what you're supposed to do with the highlighting. Now, normally, when we do the highlighting, you'd see me highlight, and I think I'm going to have to use photocopies to highlight because I only have one book. So I think I have to use photocopies to highlight, but then you can highlight directly in your book. So when you see me highlight it, then you can highlight it in your color. You should not be taking notes during this video on normal days. You will today, but not normally. Normally, you would just watch this video and highlight. Then once you've done that, you go to the next video, which will be the classwork video for that day. So every section has a highlight video and it has a classwork video. So you'll watch the highlight video first, then you'll watch the classwork video. Then after the classwork video, you need to sit down, and before you do your classwork, you need to go through and any definitions, put them on your definition page. Any theorems, put them on your theorem page, so that you can kind of make sure in any other information that I haven't written down yet for the classwork video, you need to go ahead and write down in your notes so you'd be able to find it later. It's a way of taking what's in the book and putting it in your notes without copying too much stuff. So we're going to tell you what to highlight, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to move definitions and how we move theorems, and then you can see how we move other info later on too. Today, most of what we're doing is definitions. You learned in logic that everything stemmed from definitions. Everybody had to agree upon definitions. Well, today is the day we start with definitions that everyone has agreed upon so that they can go ahead and build off of that and get the geometry. Everything in geometry is completely and utterly logical. Completely and utterly logical. And because of that, I think you're going to have a real big advantage over most students who take geometry. So let's go ahead and get to the highlighting. If you'll look, I'm on page 2. If you'll look, I'm on page 2. And I've got my yellow highlighter. So I could sit here and read this whole page to you, but I know you know how to read. I'm going to highlight the things that are really important on this page. And so when I highlight them on this piece of paper, since this looks just like your book, you highlight them in your book in yellow. Okay, so up here is kind of like their introduction and stuff, and then you have their objectives, and they're always going to have those. But down here, it's got point, and if you look, point is in italics. I'm not highlighting that part, but I do need for you to understand that point is one of 3 basic undefined terms in geometry. And I'm going to highlight it because you need to know that part. But I'm going to write that again on your other video. A point has no size and no dimension, merely position. A point is usually represented in drawing by a dot named with a capital letter. For example, the point represented in the circle at right is called point P. See? Point P. Below it has line is also undefined in geometry, but it's this part that we really need. The line is usually named by any 2 points in lowercase. And then a plane is the 3rd undefined term in geometry. Now, we just talked about how it was really important that we define our terms, and we start out with basic agreed upon definitions. These are basic agreed upon definitions. However, they are called undefined because you cannot describe them without using that term. So usually people would say a line consists of 2 points, but you have to say in a line, or linear, or some sort of fashion to say that it's a line. It's not just 2 points. There's a line connecting them, and you can't use it without saying that word, and because of that we call them undefined terms. Although a plane has no boundaries, it's usually pictured by a four-sided figure. Planes are named by a capital letter, 3 points that are not the same in the line. So that's the highlighting for this page. And then if you look on page 3, they give a couple of figures, and we'll talk about those more in the next video. But you need to know about collinear. For example, points are collinear if and only if they lie on the same line. And then they give more information about it. And then points that are non-collinear are not collinear. Coplanar points. Space and intersection. So that takes care of all of our highlighting. Now, normally this would be when you would end this video and then you would go and watch the classwork video. I need you to watch the classwork video first, because sometimes after you've heard it a little bit, you really don't need to write it down. So if after hearing it a couple of times in the classwork video, you kind of just understand some things, then there's no need to write them down. But sometimes that's not the case. So in order to set up the definitions portion of your notebook, you need to start with top page saying definitions, so you know what it is. Each definitions page is going to be split up into pictures and symbols in your first column, the actual word in your second column, and then definitions and any other information you need to know about that in the third column. Now, we're going to start with what they said. So they said a point is one of 3 basic undefined terms in geometry. So we need to know about points. So I'm going to write the word point. Okay. Information we need to know about it. Well, pictures or symbols, when they have a picture of point P, this one happened to be inside of a circle, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that it's point P. So it has to have a capital letter beside it. So I'm going to go ahead and write point P. That's my picture, that's my symbol. Definitions and information. So it says a point has no size, no dimension. No size, no dimension. Merely position. A point is usually represented by drawing a dot and named with a capital letter. And you can abbreviate any way you want to in this, because this is just for you. You're the one that has to get this information down. It's not for me to read or for me to understand. I'm going to look at it to make sure you're doing it, but I'm not going to stress over how neat it is. I'm not going to stress over whether or not you've got all the information that you need, because some of this stuff you may actually remember after looking at the other video. So if we sit there and we talk about point P enough in the other video, you may know that we're always going to use a capital letter. So you wouldn't have to write that kind of stuff down. this is basically so that you can keep up with things that you need to remember. So our next one is a line. So I'm going to write the word line. And then consists of infinitely many points without end in both directions. Doesn't end. A line is usually named by 2 points or by a lowercase letter. Named with 2 points or a lowercase letter. It doesn't matter. The order of the points. So for my picture for this one, I don't feel very creative. So I'm going to say it's line K. I'm going to use the same L and S that they have over in our book. And when I go to write it, I'm going to write the symbol right here. Because that's the symbol. When you write it, there's a picture to explain it, but when you write it in geometry, the shorthand for it, this is how you would write it. So that's kind of like the symbol for it. And it doesn't matter which one comes first. It could be line LS or line SL. Same thing. Or if you wanted to, you could really write line K. But nobody likes doing that because it's too much writing. And then the last one that they talked about was the plane. Says a plane can be thought of as a flat surface with no thickness that extends without ends in all directions. Plane. Let's see, they said it was a flat surface. No ends. Infinite. In all directions. Kind of like a tabletop that keeps on going forever and ever. Has no thickness. You might want to write that down. Then planes are named by a capital letter or by 3 points in the plane that are not the same line. So they said in here, even though it didn't get highlighted, that it was usually drawn with a 4-sided figure, like a tabletop. So they have S, R, and T. Told you I don't feel very creative. And then an X up here. X is the one that doesn't have a point. That's why it is plane X. So we could write plane RST, plane TSR, plane STR, doesn't matter what order they're in, or you could just write plane X, because X is the point that does not have an actual point beside it. So they're talking about the whole plane. use capital letters to name this. With 3 points or with 1 capital letter. And I gave both descriptions over here. Up here, I didn't say anything about capital letters. I figure you would have figured that out by now because they were points, so they had to be done by capital letters. It's the little things like that. Sometimes you don't need to write all this stuff up here, and that's okay. I don't want you to have to write anything that you don't need to remember. So if you're afraid you're going to forget, that's a reason to write it. If you're afraid that, or if you know that you know it and you're not worried about forgetting it, then you don't have to write it. You don't have to write it just because I wrote it. This is for you. You're the one that has to come up with this stuff. Okay, the other page that we had, since it was in yellow, that means it's got to go on our definitions page. So we start with the word collinear. Collinear points are points that lie on the same line. So I need to come over here and show a couple of points so that we can say A and B are collinear. Ta-da. For non-collinear, points that don't lie on the same line. We'll call this line K. And here is a B off to the side. So B is non-collinear. With line K. And that should be a lowercase k. I'll make it look more lowercase. And then you have the same thing for coplanar and non-coplanar. Now, if you don't need to draw a picture for these, then you don't have to have a picture up there, but you do need to have a definition so that you know what they are. I'm assuming you don't remember coplanar from before or non-coplanar from before. So coplanar points are points on the same plane. Points not in the same plane. And if you'll notice, I didn't write down all of this if and only if they lie in the same plane stuff. All I did was write down what I needed. And then space. It's the set of all points. And then intersection. A set of points is the intersection of two figures if and only if the points lie in both figures. Where two figures meet. That's what an intersection is. So this would be the first definitions page for you. But once again, I wouldn't worry about writing all this out normally, because normally you would have watched another video that would help drive some of these things home. So it's actually going to be less for you to write. I just wanted to kind of set it up, show you how you're going to use this page. And in the next video, in the next highlighting video, we're going to set up the next section, which is your theorems and postulates page, so that you'll be able to see how you're going to use that one. As it stands now, I think you can probably go ahead and watch the classwork video for section 1.1, and I will talk to you later.